Good morning, everyone. It's time for today's episode of the Daily Stand-Up. Lee Henson here from AgileDad. Without any further ado, let's get started. Today, I have a treat for you. I've got a very special guest, a good friend of mine, and a certified Agile coach, Jim York. Jim, how's it going?
It is going great. How are you today, Lee?
You know what? Better than a Kardashian doing a crossword puzzle. I'm not sure they can do those, but if it's about makeup or something, maybe. But anyway, I digress. So today we want to talk to you about an incredible, important Agile topic. Now, here's what's going on. Lately, if you've listened to the podcast, we've been doing a lot about product ownership, product management, product governance, and we've been talking a lot about product-related issues. But I have to admit, I have to confess, I was a darn good product owner back in the day, but I can't say that my specialty is product ownership. So I decided to bring in an expert to help me understand and to help you understand. So Jim, that's your calling. You're the expert. So with that being said, I want to start off with a simple question. So you are well known as an authority in the industry with regard to many topics, but specifically with product ownership. Tell me what you see going into organizations from a coaching perspective. What are some of the common things you see, downfalls or things that organizations need to work on with regard to product ownership? Where do you see product ownership in the world today?
Oh, wow. We want to start with the gaps, huh? Well, gosh, where do you start? Knowing what your product is.
Mhm.
I mean, I think that's a great place to start. What is your product? Who is your customer? Who's the target market? Before we even get into identifying a product owner and empowering them and giving them the support they need to excel in that job, just basically having organizations understand, what is it that we provide to our customers in terms of a product? Who are those customers? Ensuring that we got a keen understanding of what that customer's needs are and how our product fits that space in addressing that need.
Yeah, I get it. And I see the same thing when I go in and I do training. A lot of times people suffer from these same problems. And one of the top three problems that I always identify is I'll give you two of the three. So one of the three is a lack of a clear delineation of roles and responsibilities. I hear all the time, we don't have a product owner. We have a product manager. We have a product liaison, or my favorite, we have a product evangelist down by the riverside. I'm just picturing this person. But it's just, and I think that what happens is people either dilute or add to the roles. So that's one of the problems I see. The second problem I see is, just as you described, their inability to create a coherent backlog. And it's not so much writing backlog items as I would like to so that, or following the invest model. That's not the issue. The issue is just cohesion between what the product owner's thought process is and what the team's actually executing versus what the stakeholders' needs really are. So
yeah, that empathy with the customer and understanding essentially what's their job to be done, and how the product integrates into that job to be done. It's so often that the product is not the job to be done. The product is something that integrates into a larger system of things that the customer is doing to accomplish some outcome that they desire. You look at something like as simple as a product definition, like a car. I mean, not that it's a simple product, but people are like, oh, that's clearly the product. And it's like, yeah, that's the product, but that product addresses a customer need, and those needs are diverse. It's maybe I need to take my kids to school. Well, there's lots of options on how you might get your kids to school. You might be doing Zoom, these days for so what does the car have anything to do with that, versus they're in a classroom and you've got to physically get them to the classroom? I mean, there's lots of options available to the customer for that. They could be riding the bus or going in a carpool, or maybe you're running the carpool, or maybe you prefer to take them there yourself. Or there's all sorts of options available to the customer to accomplish their job to be done. The key question for a product owner is one is, who is that customer? What is their need? And how does my product fit in the context of addressing that need? And things change, right? Things change. Yep. All of a sudden it's, we're doing school from home. It's like, it's totally different. So what happened to, our product that addressed that particular need? So having that insight and empathy with the customer and being able to stay with them as that need evolves and changes over time, critically important before we even get to backlog. It's
I think you're right. One of the things I've discovered, though, is for whatever reason, every CEO I meet, every executive that I meet, CXO will say, right? Every executive that I meet says, I'm responsible for the carpool, so I want to bring all the kids to school in a Ferrari because that's agile. I want to scale and I want to do it in a Ferrari. And I'm like, I'm not sure that the product that you're trying to build is going to meet the need of what you're trying to do. And it's just,
yeah, absolutely. And one thing that is often missed is that product owners are human, right? They make errors, and that's expected. And that's part of being agile, right? Is like, I might have this brilliant idea that I'm going to run the carpool with a Ferrari. How do we run a quick, cheap test to find out whether that's going to be a viable solution or not? And I would suggest you don't go out and buy a Ferrari to run that test, right? You've got to do something else that exposes the limitations and where your solution falls short of hitting the target. That's really the important, and that's one thing that I found most organizations. You asked about what they struggle with. One of the things also is just the ability to create an increment. Mm-hmm. And people get so wrapped around the axle, they don't really understand what an increment is. An increment is your working product. It's as simple as that. If people think about it being the thing we're building in this sprint, increments are additive. It's what we built this sprint plus everything that came before.
Right.
And you can have multiple increments created within a given sprint. I mean, I have some clients that literally deploy hundreds of increments every day. It's the nature of their business. They simply have to do that. And I'm not saying building them, I'm saying deploying them into their production environment. Because if they didn't do that, they'd be eaten by their competition, because their competition does that competently every single day. If they didn't, they wouldn't be in the business. So when I walk in with many organizations implementing Scrum, the concept of an increment being your working system and doing that at least every sprint, producing an increment and having that thing that you can look at and go, yeah, that Ferrari fell short, and doing so in a way that we're not necessarily investing in all the effort to build a Ferrari. It's figuring out how to slice and dice things. It's the art of crafting that product backlog into small, easily digestible bits of valuable increments that you can inspect and get some insights on. I remember one of my times as a product owner, we were doing a transaction to a government entity for some customers. They were lenders. They were trying to get insurance certificates from a government entity that was backing some loans. And my team, when I walked to them and said, hey, I want you to build this website and do this and that and the other thing, they said, no, Jim, you really don't want to do that. And I said, well, what should I do? And they said, well, what you should do is run a test with this government entity because nobody's ever tested their gateway before. And I said, well, let's create the web page and collect the data through that and have it transform into the appropriate EDI file. And we'll send that off. I'll hook up the VPN so we can send it secure. And they said, no, Jim, you don't have to do any of that. I said, what are you going to do? They said, we're going to use a text editor, mock up a test file, and we're going to email it to the entity. And they are going to take it from the PC that's attached to the internet. And most likely they're going to have to hand carry, this was back in the day, 3.5-inch floppy disk to the PC that's attached to the mainframe so they can push it manually through their gateway. Well, this is what we did. And it took literally a couple of hours to remove the risk that the government's process might not work, right? So we were able to verify that was going to work. And later on, we brought in customers at the end. This is another thing that organizations miss, is bring in real customers and have them participate in the review. And at the end of the week, we were doing 1-week sprints. When we showed this to them, the act of transporting the 3.5-inch floppy disk was now fondly called SneakerNet, because they literally had to take it and run it down a couple of flights of stairs to where the mainframe was. And the reverse trip to bring back the response was just the same thing, back up the stairs with floppy disk, and they emailed it back to us. And guess what? Our customers were ecstatic. We had demonstrated an end-to-end process that was held together with baling twine, spit, and bubblegum.
There you go.
And SneakerNet.
Right. And the MacGyver approach sometimes has to be the right approach, right? And it's just, I remember a couple of things, and I'm just going to bring one up because it's a short one. So I remember a problem that many, many moons ago, the Walt Disney Company faced. And it was when they created art, sometimes on their campus out in Burbank, they had to get the art from one building to another. Well, the problem was occasionally they had inclement weather outside. It was rare, but they did have it. So what did they do? They built a tunnel that went underneath the ground, and they used the tunnel to run the artwork back and forth. So it was their version of sneakernet, if you will. But the things that they were originally trying to create to do this, to solve the problem, were so exorbitant and so over the top that it just wasn't needed. It was the same as bringing in someone who owns a Ferrari to tell you, you can't fit 6 kids in a Ferrari. It's just, if you bring in one customer to just tell you, I own a Ferrari, it's not going to work. Then you save the expense of having to buy the Ferrari. You save the expense of having to do a research study. You save the expense. I mean, I can go on and on. But I want to congratulate you, Jim, because you're the first person I've ever heard use the word Ferrari and inexpensive in the same sentence. You know, not that it is
inexpensive.
No. You said it. You said that I'm sure that buying a Ferrari would be a wrong choice because it's not. It would be too expensive. Which I'm just saying. But the point is, you use the inexpensive analogy with Ferrari, and I think that's just, there's nothing inexpensive about a Ferrari, which is your point.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's so neat because I think, and I hope, and this is what I hope in my mind of minds, I hope that when people hear you speak, Jim, that they're making the equation and it's resolving in their mind. So here's the resolution that I've come up with based on what you said. 1, it doesn't take a Ferrari. If you could just do simple tests to figure out what you need to do, you're going to be better off. 2, the importance of knowing your customer. If you don't know your customer implicitly and get them involved, both at the planning stages and at the resolution stages, to resolve that you built the right product or service, that you're losing most of what product ownership stands for. And 3, it takes a village. And what I mean by that is, like you said, it took a team of people who believed in what you were doing to make it all happen. It's not just resting on a product owner's shoulders. And I think too often, in the environments that I see, people just try to pile it on the product owner and say everything's the product owner's responsibility. And it just, we can't go on that way in an agile world and expect things to change.
It takes a village. I've never seen a product owner in any non-trivial environment be able to do it just by themselves.
Right.
Even in the most trivial environments, unless you are your own customer as product owner and there's no other customers, you have this interaction with that customer. But the developers and various others in the product ecosystem all contribute to insights, that creation in the mind that takes place before the creation in reality, all of that product backlog refinement stuff that's going on. It takes the whole group to figure that out and come up with hypotheses that we're going to try out. And even though we did the sneakernet thing, I have to share another brief story.
Please.
So I was asked to come in as a coach to work with a team that was coding an algorithm for one of the sensors on an autonomous driving vehicle. Just one sensor that they were working on at that time, and just one algorithm associated with taking the input from that sensor. Now, this is kind of the backup algorithm for the primary algorithm. Evidently, there's a primary, a secondary, and then a tertiary kind of fail-safe. That if those two algorithms can't agree on what the right thing to do is, it defaults to the third answer, which is something that is perceived to be safe, like stop the vehicle.
Exactly.
We don't know what's going on. So this team was doing the secondary algorithm, and I asked the team what was the one thing that they really wish they had that they didn't have, and one of the team members said the car. And I was like, oh, cool. You like the car? No, we want the car because we would like to have the algorithm running in the actual car rather than the simulators that we're using. And I was like, oh, well, what would that do for you? And they said that would tell us what actually happens. And I said, well, doesn't the simulator do that? And they said, no. A couple of problems. One, it's a simulation.
Right. 2
is we are the experts running the simulation. So we already know how the sensor works. We understand how the algorithm works. We know what kind of tests we're throwing. We know too much. What we really need is a naive driver. We need somebody who doesn't know anything about this vehicle, doesn't even know that there's this autonomous feature going on that's going to do something like nudge them back into the lane. And we want to see what happens, what the reaction is when the car does something that might be unexpected.
Right.
And I laughed because I had arrived in their city late at night. It was snowing. The roads were terrible. It wasn't really late. Like there was still rush hour kind of stuff going on, but it was dark. It was in the winter, and there was snow. There were potholes, and I'm driving a vehicle, a rental vehicle, from the airport to the client site, to the hotel next to them, and I'm trying to avoid potholes. I'm looking at the navigation system and looking for which of the next 4 exits was the one I was supposed to take. And unfamiliar city, unfamiliar car, dark, the roads got issues. And I'm trying to swerve to avoid potholes and trying to figure out which exit to take. And the navigation screen, the nice big screen that's showing me, my map and which exit I'm supposed to take, suddenly disappears, and a message comes up and tells me to make sure I keep both my hands on the wheel. And I'm looking over at the screen going, I wonder which exit I'm supposed to take. Yeah. Later on in the drive, I was swerving to avoid a pothole, and the lane correction algorithm steered me back into the pothole. Now I overpowered it because it's not more powerful than you are, but it was one of those things where, like, I get what you're telling me is that you don't really know until you get the product in the hands of your real customer.
Mm-hmm.
So,
makes total sense.
So figuring out how to craft these hypotheses that we collect into this product backlog, that product backlog refinement, it is so critically important. Getting this role right, it's like the secret sauce in Agile. If you don't get that right, everything else is for nothing.
Amen. I love that. I ought to put that as a quote. If you don't get the secret sauce right, the rest is all for naught, because you're absolutely right. And I was just going to throw another caveat in there with regard to the correction. When you do force the overcorrection, then you have to worry about the little thing that you plug in that tells your insurance company that you're a reckless driver. So your insurance rates go up the more you overcorrect. No, but it's just, and it brings to mind one last story that I'll share, because we're having a good time sharing stories. So I'm letting it go a little long. Here in Utah, so I have an office in Utah and an office in Florida. I'm here in Utah today. In Utah, they had a story about a Tesla. So the Tesla was self-driving. It was flying down Bangor Highway, one of the highways here, and it was going 60 plus miles an hour, yes, which is normal. It's within the speed limit, so we're fine. And they have these, so they're trying to do away with all the traffic lights on this road because they want to make it a direct express type road. But they still have a couple of traffic lights where they haven't rebuilt the intersection yet. And at one of these intersections, they had an emergency services vehicle. Now, this emergency services vehicle was very tall. So when a Tesla was coming up on it, it didn't pick up or read what the traffic light said, first of all. Second of all, it had a certain kind of bumper. It was one of those jaws of life, remove people from cars vehicles. So it was very tall off the ground. So it didn't pick up the reflection off of the back of the emergency services vehicle either. So it didn't think it had any vehicle in front of it and thought it had a complete green light. So it kept going at 70 miles an hour and went underneath the emergency service. It literally crunched into a ball underneath the emergency services vehicle. The news came out the next day. Everyone was screaming, Tesla's self-driving is horrible. This happened in this accident. How could this happen? And Elon Musk came out with an interview. And here's what he said. He said, everybody's talking about how Tesla self-driving failed. He said, but you missed the real part of the story. The driver of that vehicle got out of the vehicle completely okay with a sprained ankle. He said, not only did the car do what it was supposed to do, he says, but you're missing the fact that it's the safest car on the road. And I thought that was really interesting because he didn't, he admitted, he says, we need to do better at picking up these things. He says it was one of those anomalies that's just totally something nobody in the world would have tested for that, right? Let's run it at the back of an emergency services vehicle. It's excessively tall that blocks a green light and see what happens. Nobody would have run that test, right? But the fact that the person in the car only walked away with a sprained ankle, Elon Musk called that a success. And I think sometimes what you're trying to say, or what I'm trying to say at least, is that sometimes product ownership goes beyond, just meeting the acceptance criteria. Sometimes it goes beyond just the standard batch of testing that we have. Sometimes we need to think things through at a deeper level. And I so appreciate what you're adding to this, Jim, because your addition to this is amazing.
So what you've just described, Lee, is what Chris Ardress just talks about as double loop learning, right? So that single loop is it built as designed? And that's something I coach my Scrum teams on, is that should be the default. Every sprint, the stuff that you sign up for in the sprint planning meeting and you just determine what the acceptance criteria are, you should arrive at the sprint review most of the time having done exactly that. Maybe some slight modifications or revisions based on things that you learn as you go, but you shouldn't be arriving at the sprint review going, I wonder if we did what we set out to do. That's the single loop learning. It's like the thermostat on the wall. Is it keeping the room at 72 degrees? And if as long as it's keeping the room at 72 degrees, then it's doing what it's supposed to do. And that's like the Scrum team. It's like, yes, if you set the thermostat at 72 degrees, if you take on this work in the sprint planning meeting, the expectation is at the sprint review, that set of work will be done. With maybe some exception, but the default would be that. The double loop learning is then you ask the customer, so we built what you asked for. Does it do for you what you had hoped it would do? And that's the thing with the Tesla ending up under the emergency services vehicle. It's like, yeah, it might have performed exactly as designed. And thank goodness the person emerged with hopefully minor injuries. Hopefully that wasn't a long-term issue with the sprain. But did you ask that customer who got out of that vehicle alive, so did the car do for you what you want it to do? Is there anything else you would like us to do to improve your future experience with our products?
He ended up getting a free Tesla.
The double loop is you change the inputs, you change the assumptions, and you apply learning. And that's really what the product owner job is about. At the end of the day, it's activating a learning loop. That's really what it's about. It's activating a learning loop that enables us to discover what we could not possibly have known before we built that increment and subjected it to a real test with a real customer and activated that feedback that creates the learning. And you only have real learning if you apply that learning and you make an adaptation to the product to make it better.
All right, Jim. Well, we went long, but I got three. I have to ask you the three questions. And it's not what did you do today? What did you do yesterday? And do you have any impediments? But the three questions. So here's question number one. Question number one, if someone was starting out as a product owner, they were brand new, and you had a single small piece of advice you can give them, 15 words or less, what piece of advice would you give a product owner who's just starting out, just learning the ropes? What would you tell them is the most important thing that they could focus their attention on?
Oh my goodness. Understand your customer.
Good. Love it. Question number two. If I had someone who felt like they've been doing this for a series of years and they were a well-seasoned, experienced product owner, and you could give them one piece of advice going forward to help them just have a better purview and to help them see, into the crystal ball of what they should be working on now, what one item would you tell someone who is experienced that they would have to grow?
It really depends on that individual and kind of where they've gone to, because there are a lot of people with a lot of experience, and depending on the context of the environment that they're in. But I guess the thing I would say, Lee, in a nutshell, is consider the whole product ecosystem.
Right.
We don't often think about all the dimensions of what makes a product work from a customer's perspective. And that's real product ownership. A lot of times we give these product owners these jobs of guide this Scrum team. Well, luckily, the latest version of the Scrum Guide explains that the developers are everyone that needs to do anything related to making the product work for the customer. It's like, wow, that's big. And that's been something that's been a short sight, I think, in execution. Not that the Scrum framework has changed with this latest version. I think the intent and the spirit of it has remained the same from the early days.
Very early, yep.
Just the words that are in there now are more clear, more explicit, and simpler in many ways. So I would encourage anyone who has not done so. They might be familiar with earlier versions of the Scrum Guide, but I would encourage them to go out and read that latest version, the November 2020 version. They might see some things in there that could help them up their game if they were to take that and put it into action.
And last question, obviously. If someone wants to learn more about what you're doing, or if you have a shameless plug for a book, a website, a blog, whatever, anything you have. I just want people to be able to reach you if they want to reach you, because this has been amazing. You've shared some really powerful insight. You've given some great information. You've helped uplift a lot of the people who listen to my podcast. And from my heart, I can't tell you how much I appreciate that. So share with us anything that's important. And if you don't want to do that, that's okay. I have an alternate question. The alternate question is, and you can do both. The alternate question is, if I gave you the power to change one thing regarding Agile without any ramifications, or regarding product ownership within Agile without any ramifications, what lever would you pull first? So you can do both.
Yeah. Okay. So the first one is, if you want to know more about me, you can follow me on Twitter. I'm at FoxHedge. And my company is FoxHedge Ltd. It's foxhedgeltd.com is the website. I co-founded that company with my wife, Melissa, 14 and a half years ago.
Wow.
She is our product owner, by the way. So if you ever want to know what's going on with FoxHedge and you want to get in our product backlog, hey, talk to Melissa, because she's the go-to person for that. What is the one thing, I guess, Lee, the thing that I'm frustrated with that I would like to change is all of the bashing of Agile, and that, and I'm collectively, in the various aspects of Agile, like Scrum, there's a lot of Agile bashing out there. And it's like, oh, we got to come out with, version 2 or version 3 of Agile. And it's like, I'm not sure people have tried version 1 yet.
I was just about to say, I don't think they understand version 1 yet.
Yeah. So it's like, give it a try the way that it's actually, designed and in environments for which it is built, give it a chance. Don't give it lip service and then say it didn't work.
Jim.
So that would be the one thing I would change, is have people actually try it for real.
Try new things.
Get some guidance, get some help. If you don't understand it, ask questions. And there are folks, Lee, like you and others that are experts in this area, that you got people you can reach out to and ask for support if you don't understand it. But be open to it and give it a try.
Jim, that was powerful advice. I really appreciate your time. I know time's the most valuable thing you have, and I appreciate you carving out a few minutes to spend with the Daily Stand-Up.
It's been my pleasure, Lee. Really
Take care. And as always, if you have questions about this topic or any others, feel free to reach out to Jim or reach out to me. You can reach us both directly. We would love to answer your questions. Anything, if you forgot his information, you can rewind and listen to it again. But if not, you can send an email to learnmore@agiledad.com, and we'd love to fill it in, and we'll make sure that we pass along anything we get to Jim. Make sure you share this with your other friends. Show us some love. Show us some likes, show us some praise. And as always, we want you to stay healthy, stay well, and stay agile. Until next time, do take care, my friends. We'll see you.